Welcome to Velvet Audiobooks. Have you ever found yourself standing before an ancient, moss-covered castle lying silent beneath the stillness of the night? When the mist coils around towering spires, when the wind whistles through shattered window frames, when the world sinks into a silence so deep it feels almost alive. Have you ever wondered what hides behind those stone walls, behind the rotting wooden doors, beneath the breath of centuries long gone? Is there a story waiting to be told or a secret forever entombed? Now imagine something even more unsettling. What if you could never die? Not from age, not from illness, not from accident. Imagine existing forever, watching everything and everyone you love fade into dust while you remain unchanged. Would immortality be a priceless gift or the most devastating curse a soul could endure? What would you do with endless time? Would you accumulate knowledge, witness civilizations rise and fall? Or would you become trapped in an eternal loop of meaninglessness, watching humanity repeat the same ancient mistakes while you grow numb, indifferent, and impossibly alone? Immortality sounds glorious until you glimpse the horror beneath it. And no, today's story is not just about vampires, fangs, or cold blood. The tale we are about to enter, Dracula, by Bram Stoker, goes far deeper than that. It is not simply a legend of a monster. It is a mirror held up to the darkest corners of human nature, to the hidden desires we bury, the primal urges we deny, the hunger for power without limit, and the terror of facing the shadows that live within ourselves. This darkness is not outside, it is within, and it waits in places we dare not look. Over the next hour, we will step into the mist-shrouded world of Transylvania, walk the ancient halls of Count Dracula's castle, and confront not only an immortal predator, but the deeper truths he represents. So I must ask you, are you ready? Ready to uncover the greatest fear of the Victorian age, and perhaps your own? Join me now as we step into the eternal darkness. Dracula. The name alone conjures a cascade of images: a fearsome vampire count, a shadowed castle perched high in the Carpathians, razor-sharp fangs, and the glimmer of red blood. This figure has carved itself into the cultural memory of humanity. But is that truly all he is? Is Dracula merely a monster meant to frighten children? Or does he conceal within his legend something far deeper, a reflection of our own hidden fears? Welcome to this special series, where we journey into unraveling Dracula more than a monster. Today, we begin our exploration of Bram Stoker's immortal novel, not simply to revisit a classic horror tale, but to understand why this story continues to haunt us over a century later. Let us return to the final years of the 19th century, 1897, when Bram Stoker first introduced Count Dracula to the world. The Victorian era was a curious paradox: magnificent scientific progress on the surface and rising anxieties beneath it. Electricity was illuminating cities, railways were stitching continents together, Darwin's theories were reshaping humanity's understanding of itself. Logic, reason, and science were triumphant. Yet beneath the polished veneer of progress simmered fears: fear of disease, fear of death, fear of the unknown, fear of cultural others entering England from distant lands. Victorian society was confident, yet quietly terrified. Superstition had not vanished, it had merely found new disguises. And from this world of contradiction, Stoker birthed Count Dracula, a being from the ancient East, untouched by modernity, a relic of a world older than science itself. He was the embodiment of everything the Victorians feared: corruption, invasion, moral decay, spiritual threat, and the collapse of their orderly universe. In this series, we will not simply read Dracula. We will live it. We will walk beside Jonathan Harker as he steps into the Count's cursed castle. We will stand with Mina Harker and Lucy Westenra as they face the indescribable. We will sift through journals, letters, and newspaper clippings to uncover the story piece by piece, exactly as Stoker intended. We will explore Dracula not just as a creature of night, but as a symbol of desire, of fear, of the uncanny, of the other, and perhaps even of the human condition itself. Why did he emerge at this moment in history? Why does he endure today? Why does he still frighten and fascinate us? Our journey will span 12 chapters, each delving deeper into the psychological, social, and cultural layers beneath this masterpiece. We will approach the story from the lenses of psychology, sociology, and human desire, revealing why Dracula continues to pulse in the collective imagination of our world. Prepare yourself not only for chills, but for discovery. Together, we will uncover timeless truths about fear, identity, temptation, morality, and the shadows within the human soul. And perhaps, through this journey, we will learn as much about ourselves as we do about the immortal Count. If you are ready, let us turn the very first page of Dracula and begin. Chapter 1. An invitation from the dark Jonathan Harker's journal. Today, we begin our descent into the first chapter of Dracula, a chapter that takes us from the heart of modern London into the ancient, mist-soaked world of Transylvania. This is where it all begins, the slow unraveling of reason, the first whispers of dread, and the quiet, inevitable pull of the darkness. Jonathan Harker, a young solicitor full of ambition and confidence, sets out on what appears to be a routine professional trip. His task is simple: travel to Transylvania to assist Count Dracula in acquiring real estate in London. Straightforward, businesslike, harmless. Yet beneath that simplicity lies the seed of a tragedy. Before we follow Jonathan into the castle itself, we must understand the symbolic weight he carries. Jonathan is the very image of the Victorian West, rational, logical, scientific, grounded in law and order. He trusts in contracts, evidence, and the progress of his era. He believes the world operates according to rules that are measurable and predictable. And it is precisely this faith, this unshakable belief in reason, that blinds him. As he travels deeper into Eastern Europe, he encounters a landscape far removed from the polished comforts of London. The air grows thicker, the woods denser, and the soil darker. Villagers whisper warnings. Their eyes widen in terror at the mention of Dracula's castle. They clutch rosaries, draw protective signs, offer garlands of garlic as shields against unseen forces. To Jonathan, these gestures seem quaint relics of a superstitious past. He smiles politely, dismisses them as folklore, and writes notes in his journal with the detached curiosity of a tourist. He cannot understand, or refuses to understand, that these people live in a world where reason fails, where the night is alive, and where the ancient still holds dominion. His journey is not merely a physical one. It is a collision between two worldviews, two civilizations, two definitions of reality. And as he approaches the castle, this collision becomes inevitable. When Jonathan finally meets Count Dracula, he is surprised. Instead of a monstrous figure from legend, the Count appears refined, a gentleman of noble stature, articulate, cultured, fluent in multiple languages. His manners are impeccable. His knowledge of England is precise and expansive. His presence is commanding. But beneath this refined exterior lies something profoundly unsettling. Jonathan notices details small at first, but accumulating. The Count's cold touch, his unnaturally strong grip, his absence during daylight hours, his refusal to eat or drink, the strange echo of footsteps in empty hallways, the eerie silence of a castle without servants. Jonathan writes down these observations, yet he tries to rationalize them. Perhaps the Count is eccentric, he thinks. Perhaps customs are different here. He clings to explanations that feel safe, even when the truth presses against the edges of his perception. But there are red flags he cannot ignore. He discovers locked doors, letters he has written that never leave the castle, rooms that shift from welcoming to forbidding, and the chilling realization that he is not a guest but a prisoner. The turning point arrives one night when Jonathan encounters the three women in the castle, the seductive, ghost-like figures whose beauty is matched only by the hunger in their eyes. They approach him with an irresistible, almost hypnotic sensuality. Their presence is intoxicating, terrifying, beautiful, deadly. As they lean toward him, ready to feed, Jonathan hovers between desire and terror, and only Dracula's sudden intervention saves him. Not out of mercy, but possession. The Count has reserved Jonathan for himself. From this moment, Jonathan's unraveling accelerates. His confident prose turns frantic. His rational mind fractures. He doubts his senses, questions his sanity, and realizes that no logic can save him now. He watches Dracula crawl down castle walls like an animal. He sees shadows move where no shadows should be. He learns that the Count casts no reflection. With each revelation, Jonathan's world, the world of law, order, reason, collapses like a fragile skeleton crushed beneath the weight of something ancient and predatory. His journal becomes less a record and more a plea for survival. Jonathan Harker entered Transylvania as a young professional on a business trip. Now, he is a trapped man in the lair of a creature beyond his comprehension. And yet, his story is only the beginning. For outside the castle walls, the Count has already set his sights elsewhere. His move to London, to the heart of Victorian civilization, has already begun. Jonathan is merely the first thread in a web that will soon stretch across continents. What awaits him? Will he escape? And what horrors will Dracula unleash upon England once he arrives? We will uncover these answers in the next chapter. Chapter 2. Dracula's Castle, a prison of body and mind. In this chapter, we leave behind the journey and step fully into the heart of darkness, the castle of Count Dracula, a structure ancient and magnificent, yet hollow at its core, a monument not to life but to decay. If Jonathan Harker's arrival in Transylvania was unsettling, then his entry into the castle is a full descent into psychological imprisonment. The castle is not merely stone and shadow, it is a living entity, a carefully engineered machine built to isolate, confuse, and consume the mind. Imagine this: you have traveled endlessly through wild lands, entered a world where language falters and customs seem almost spectral, and your final destination is a towering fortress that looms like a fossil of some extinct civilization. At first glance, Dracula's castle overwhelms with its gothic grandeur, arching corridors, towering battlements, long hallways swallowed by darkness, windows that frame the vast emptiness of the mountains. But beneath that grandeur lies rot. Dust clings to every surface. Fabrics crumble at the touch. The smell of damp stone clings to the air. It is a monument to a past that refuses to die, a relic sustained by something unnatural. The castle mirrors Dracula himself, majestic on the outside, but hollow and corrupted within. As Jonathan explores further, he begins to understand the truth: this is not a home. This is a tomb, a crypt carved into the mountain, sealed away from time, light, and humanity. Every room amplifies the sense of absence: no servants, no footsteps, no signs of ordinary life. The silence is oppressive, a silence so heavy it presses on the mind. And within this tomb, something far more terrifying begins to happen. Time starts to lose meaning. Days and nights dissolve into one another. During the daylight hours, the castle becomes deathly still. Not peaceful but eerily frozen, as if holding its breath. There is no comfort in sunlight here. It brings no life, no warmth. Jonathan finds no freedom, only the gnawing frustration of locked doors and endless stone. When night falls, the world inverts. The castle awakens not with human activity, but with a predatory presence. Doors that held firm during the day seem uncertain at night. Shadows shift where they should not. The sense of being watched intensifies. Jonathan becomes acutely aware that Dracula roams the halls after sunset, not as a host, but as a hunter. Sleep offers no refuge. The mind begins to twist under isolation. Time blurs. Jonathan finds himself unable to distinguish dream from waking terror. His journal entries become his only anchor. And then there are the brides, the three vampiric women, whose presence is as hypnotic as it is deadly. They are both beautiful and haunting, their allure dangerously intertwined with their monstrosity. In Victorian England, where female desire was suppressed, the appearance of these women is a shock to the system. They embody forbidden sensuality, predatory femininity, and the terrifying consequences of repressed desire. When they approach Jonathan, the moment is intoxicating and horrifying in equal measure. He feels himself drawn toward them, caught between instinctual fear and forbidden yearning. Their touch is cold, their voices irresistible, their hunger palpable. Jonathan is not merely in danger physically, he is in danger of losing himself, his identity, his sanity, his will. Dracula interrupts them, but not out of mercy. He asserts ownership. Jonathan is his prey. The brides may have the scraps, but the Count has claimed the man for himself. From here, Jonathan's decline is swift and tragic. His rational mind, once so firm, so confident, begins to fracture under the relentless pressure. He tries to maintain order by writing, but even his journal becomes uncertain, as if the words themselves are slipping away from him. The castle twists his thoughts, amplifies his fears, distorts his sense of reality. He sees Dracula scaling the walls like a creature of the night, defying gravity with unnatural ease. He witnesses the Count transform, vanish, reappear. He tests every escape route, only to find stone barriers or locked doors. Every path leads him deeper into the castle's psychological maze. He realizes the ultimate truth: this castle is a prison, not only for his body, but for his mind. Jonathan Harker, once a confident solicitor, is reduced to a desperate soul clinging to sanity. His transformation reflects a chilling truth about fear, that it does not always strike with violence. Sometimes it corrodes slowly through isolation, uncertainty, and the erosion of one's sense of self. And yet, even in the depths of despair, Jonathan resolves to escape, even if it means risking his life, even if it means confronting the monster head-on. It is a fragile hope, but the only hope he has left. What fate awaits him? Will he find freedom or fall completely into the Count's grasp? And what of Dracula's larger plan? For even as Jonathan fights for his survival, the Count is preparing for his own journey across the sea, toward London, toward the beating heart of modern civilization. That journey begins in the next chapter, Chapter 3, The Demeter, the Spread of Evil. We now turn to one of the most haunting and atmospheric sections of Dracula, the doomed voyage of the ship Demeter, the vessel that ferries the Count from the remote mountains of Transylvania to the shores of England. This chapter marks a shift in scale. The evil that was once confined to a castle now begins its journey toward the heart of the modern world. To understand the weight of this moment, we must remember the mindset of Victorian England. It was a society confident in its power, the greatest empire on earth, a fortress of progress, industry, and moral order. Yet beneath that confidence simmered an anxiety, the fear of the foreign, the unfamiliar, the outsider who could infiltrate their carefully ordered world. Dracula becomes a symbol of that fear, not merely a creature of folklore, but the embodiment of the Victorian terror of invasion, contamination, and cultural disruption. He is not just a supernatural being, he is the ultimate outsider, arriving from the east, carrying with him corruption and death. The voyage of the Demeter is the perfect metaphor for this dread. Imagine the ship a sturdy cargo vessel, its sails taut against the cold wind of the Black Sea. Its crew seasoned, hardy, accustomed to storms, danger, and the unpredictable moods of the ocean. They are practical men not prone to superstition, not easily shaken. Yet they have unknowingly taken aboard a cargo unlike any other 50 boxes of earth and one silent, unseen passenger. The evil aboard the Demeter does not reveal itself with spectacle or violence. It reveals itself with absence. One by one, crew members begin to disappear. A man is missing in the morning, with no trace left behind, not even a scream. Another falls from the rigging after claiming he saw something slithering through the mist. The atmosphere grows colder, heavier, as if the air itself has thickened. The men begin to whisper among themselves. They do not name what they fear, but we, the readers, understand. Dracula moves among them unseen, feeding in the night, draining their life, their courage, their hope. The ship becomes a floating coffin. What makes this section so chilling is the way Bram Stoker tells it through the captain's logbook. The entries begin routine, calm, almost mundane. Then gradually, the handwriting tightens, the sentences shorten, and the tone fractures under pressure. The captain tries to explain the deaths. Logically, perhaps there is a stowaway, or an animal hiding in the hold. He insists on rationality, even as that rationality crumbles. This logbook becomes a portrait of a man descending into terror. The captain is not a coward. He is brave, seasoned, and proud. But courage is meaningless when the enemy is invisible, unstoppable, and incomprehensible. Crew members begin keeping watch in pairs, then in groups. Then no one dares to be alone at all. Men mutter prayers, clutch charms, and refuse to enter the cargo hold where the crates of earth are stored. And yet, every night, someone dies. The terror is not chaotic, it is deliberate. Dracula feeds slowly, savoring the inevitable collapse of morale, draining hope before he drains blood. The turning point comes when the crew discovers that the crates of earth have been disturbed, and that something moves among them. Something sleeping, waking, feeding. The captain realizes the truth: his ship is no longer under his command. It belongs to the darkness. And still, he fights. He ties himself to the wheel to keep control of the vessel, determined to guide it to shore, no matter the cost. He becomes the ship's final guardian, a tragic, heroic figure in a battle he knows he cannot win. When the Demeter finally reaches the coast of Whitby, England, the townspeople find a ghost ship. Its sails are torn. Its deck is littered with ropes that swing in the wind like nooses. Its captain's corpse is bound to the wheel, his lifeless eyes staring into the distance, his hands frozen in duty. And from the ship's hull leaps a massive black dog, or rather, the wolf-like form of Count Dracula himself vanishing into the English night. The soil from Transylvania spills across the dock. The cargo is unloaded without understanding. The evil has arrived. This moment is more than a dramatic entrance. It symbolizes the crossing of boundaries: geographic, cultural, psychological. Dracula has infiltrated the heart of the empire, bringing with him disease, corruption, and death. The invasion has begun. The Demeter's voyage is a masterpiece of atmospheric horror, a slow, suffocating descent into dread, told through the desperate eyes of men who cannot comprehend what stalks them. And now, with Dracula loose in England, the true nightmare begins. Chapter 4. Lucy Westenra, the Staining of Innocence. Today, we step into one of the most haunting and tragic arcs in Dracula, the story of Lucy Westenra, a young woman whose purity, beauty, and gentle spirit make her a symbol of innocence in Victorian England, and whose fate becomes one of the novel's most devastating transformations. Lucy Westenra embodies the ideal Victorian woman. She is kind, graceful, tender, and radiantly beautiful, the sort of luminous presence that inspires affection from everyone around her. Her charm is effortless, her heart generous, and her nature unguarded. It is no surprise that she becomes the object of affection for 3 remarkable men. She receives 3 marriage proposals in a single day, a detail Stoker uses to reflect both her irresistible allure and the constraints of her society. First is Arthur Holmwood, the epitome of a noble gentleman, composed, honest, wealthy, and deeply devoted to Lucy. He represents the perfect husband in Victorian terms: stable, respectable, and safe. Then there is Dr. John Seward, the brilliant and earnest director of a mental asylum, whose love for Lucy is profound, but tinged with the analytical curiosity of a scientist. His affection is sincere, yet shaped by his fascination with the workings of the human mind. The third is Quincy Morris, the rugged American, bold, adventurous, a man of action and courage, fiercely loyal, with a heart full of warmth. His sincerity is unmistakable, his manner refreshingly direct. Lucy chooses Arthur, yet she holds affection for all 3, not romantic, but deeply human. Her choice underscores a truth about her world. For Victorian women, marriage was not simply a union of hearts, but a social decision intertwined with duty, family, and stability. And then, Lucy's tragedy begins. The first signs are subtle. She grows tired easily. Her complexion pales. She experiences restless sleep, wandering in the night as if drawn by an unseen force. Her friends and loved ones attribute it to stress or illness, but we, the readers, recognize the shadow of Dracula beginning to fall over her life. With each nocturnal visit, her vitality drains. Her dreams become darker. Her breath grows shallow, and her purity, the very essence of her Victorian ideal, begins to erode. Stoker crafts Lucy's decline not merely as physical deterioration, but as a symbolic corruption. Her illness is a violation, intimate, invasive, and unspoken. Dracula's attacks mark her in ways both literal and metaphorical. The tiny wounds on her neck are subtle at first, but they represent a deep defilement, an intrusion into a body that society believes should remain untouched except through marriage. Lucy begins to undergo a disturbing transformation. Her beauty shifts into something uncanny, still striking, but tinged with an unnatural glow. Her innocence slowly distorts into a sensuality that feels foreign, unsettling, and ominous. For Victorian readers, who viewed female sexual desire with suspicion or outright fear, this was deeply disturbing. Lucy becomes a figure of dangerous allure, her suffering intertwined with themes of temptation, contamination, and lost purity. In a desperate attempt to save her, Dr. Seward and later Professor Van Helsing perform multiple blood transfusions. These scenes are among the most symbolically charged in the novel. Arthur gives his blood. Then Seward. Then Quincy. Even Van Helsing himself. Each transfusion is a blending of life forces, a profoundly intimate act. Victorian society would never openly acknowledge it, but the idea of one woman receiving the literal essence of multiple men carries undeniable sexual undertones. Lucy becomes in the eyes of her society tainted, not by intention, but by circumstance. And yet, it is not enough. Dracula's influence is stronger than any medical intervention. Each night he drains her, and each day the men desperately refill her, a futile cycle that symbolizes the powerlessness of science against the supernatural. For every ounce of life they give, the Count takes more. Eventually, Lucy dies. But her story does not end with death. She rises as one of the undead, transformed into something both beautiful and monstrous. Her features are more alluring than ever, yet twisted by a predatory hunger. She becomes a creature of the night, her innocence entirely consumed, her tenderness replaced by cruelty and desire. What makes her undeath so horrifying is not merely that she hunts, but whom she hunts: children. This inversion of maternal instinct was a deliberate scandal to Victorian morality. Where once Lucy represented purity and nurturing femininity, she now embodies corrupted motherhood, a perversion of everything she once was. To save her soul, a terrible act must be done. Arthur, the man she loved, gentle, devoted Arthur, must drive a stake through her heart. He performs the act with trembling hands, guided by Van Helsing. It is brutal, devastating, and deeply symbolic. As the stake pierces her heart, Lucy's vampiric form contorts in agony, but then, almost immediately, she is restored. Her face softens. Her innocence returns. Peace washes over her features for the first time since her ordeal began. Her release is tragic yet necessary. She cannot live as a monster, nor exist as a symbol of corrupted purity. Her soul is freed only through violence. Lucy Westenra becomes one of the most enduring symbols in Dracula, a portrait of Victorian anxieties surrounding womanhood, desire, purity, and the terrifying consequences of violating those ideals. Her transformation from innocent maiden to predatory vampire is both a personal tragedy and a cultural metaphor. Her story lingers as a reminder of the fragility of innocence and of the shadows that creep in when society refuses to confront its own fears. In the next chapter, we delve into the lives of Dr. Seward and Renfield, where the conflict between reason and madness takes center stage. Chapter 5. Dr. Seward and Renfield reason against madness. We have journeyed through the haunted forests of Transylvania, into the tomb-like corridors of Dracula's castle, across the doomed waters of the Demeter, and into the tragic unraveling of Lucy Westenra. Now, we turn to a new kind of darkness, not supernatural, but psychological. This chapter brings us to Dr. John Seward's asylum, a place that Victorian society viewed as a fortress of reason, a sanctuary where madness could be observed, categorized, and controlled. But what happens when madness knows more truth than reason dares to believe? This is the heart of Chapter 5, the clash between logic and insanity, embodied by two men: Dr. Seward and his most disturbing patient. Renfield. Dr. John Seward represents the Victorian ideal of scientific progress. He is brilliant, analytical, and deeply committed to understanding the human mind through observation and evidence. His asylum is his laboratory. His patients are puzzles to be solved. And his greatest tool, one he uses religiously, is the phonograph. Seward records everything: his thoughts, his doubts, his analyses of Renfield's behavior. He hopes that by documenting every detail, he might uncover the hidden mechanisms of madness, as if insanity were a machine whose gears could be charted and predicted. The phonograph becomes a symbol of his faith in technology, rationality, and data. He believes that with enough information, he can understand everything. But Renfield defies him. Renfield is not the typical patient. He is a storm of contradictions, lucid one moment, raving the next, brilliant in flashes, terrifyingly primal in others. His obsession centers on a single theme: life force. He begins by collecting flies. He feeds them to spiders. He then feeds spiders to sparrows. He requests a cat to consume the sparrows. Each step represents a twisted ladder of vitality, as if Renfield believes he can accumulate life by consuming creatures in ascending order. Modern readers may see madness, but within the context of the story, his obsession reflects a truth he cannot articulate: Dracula's essence. The Count, too, feeds on life. Renfield senses the presence of his master long before anyone else does. This is what makes Renfield terrifying. He is insane but also attuned. His madness acts like an antenna, picking up vibrations from the supernatural world that Seward's rational mind cannot perceive. He speaks in riddles that hint at Dracula's arrival. He grows agitated as the Count draws closer. His behavior changes with every step Dracula takes toward England. Seward records everything but understands nothing. This is the tragedy of Victorian rationality, its blind spots, its refusal to believe anything that cannot be measured, its tendency to dismiss intuition, superstition, and spiritual terror as mere delusion. Renfield becomes the embodiment of Stoker's challenge to Victorian science. His insanity is not simply illness, it is sensitivity. It is a dark awareness that reason cannot penetrate. As Renfield grows more erratic, Seward becomes increasingly frustrated. He tries to diagnose him, to classify him, to impose structure on something fundamentally chaotic. But Renfield is not a puzzle, he is a prophecy. A warning missed, a signal ignored. Madness and reason begin to switch places. Renfield's ravings contain truth. Seward's logic blinds him. This reversal is one of the most profound motifs in the novel. Dr. Seward, with his education and technology, cannot see the supernatural threat standing at his doorstep. Renfield, with his fractured mind, feels it intimately, like a ripple in the air, a vibration in the marrow, a whispered command in the dead of night. Renfield worships Dracula not out of fear, but reverence. He sees the Count as a bringer of life, twisted, monstrous life, but life nonetheless. In a world that worshipped progress, Renfield worships power. His madness is horrific, yet strangely prophetic. All the while, Seward clings to his phonograph, listening to his own voice crack under stress. His recordings reflect a mind unraveling not because he is going insane, but because his faith in science is being challenged by forces for which he has no framework. This chapter, at its core, shows the limits of reason. When confronted with phenomena beyond empirical understanding, Seward's tools become useless, even laughable. His scientific rigidity imprisons him just as surely as the asylum walls imprison Renfield. Madness whispers truths that reason cannot bear. As the chapter ends, the tension between Seward and Renfield deepens, foreshadowing the moment when Renfield's frantic warnings will become impossible to ignore and too late to act upon. The stage is set. Dracula is already in England. Lucy has fallen. Seward is struggling against an unseen tide, and Renfield is the canary in the coal mine, screaming as the darkness spreads. In the next chapter, a new figure emerges who will bridge the gap between science and the supernatural: Professor Van Helsing. Chapter 6. Van Helsing, when science meets the supernatural. We have witnessed the unraveling of Jonathan Harker's sanity, the tragic collapse of Lucy Westenra's innocence, the ominous arrival of Dracula upon England's shore, and the profound limits of Victorian science through Dr. Seward's struggles. Now, a new figure enters the story, a man who stands at the crossroads of two worlds. A scholar, a physician, a philosopher, a believer. Professor Abraham Van Helsing. His arrival marks a turning point not simply in the plot, but in the novel's deeper themes. Van Helsing embodies something rare: a mind that embraces science and mysticism, logic and legend, reason and faith. Where others see contradiction, he sees connection. He is not a man of one discipline, but of many. And that is precisely why he becomes the only person capable of understanding what is truly happening. Dr. Seward, brilliant as he is, has reached his intellectual limits. Everything he knows, medicine, psychology, science, has failed him. Lucy weakens despite every transfusion. Her symptoms defy categorization. No medical theory can explain the puncture marks on her throat, the blood loss without bleeding, the pallor that deepens no matter how much life they pour into her veins. Seward's voice, once confident, now trembles with confusion. And so, in desperation, he calls upon his old mentor Van Helsing. Van Helsing arrives not as a savior, but as a teacher. He examines Lucy with the eyes of a physician, but also with something more: intuition, ancient knowledge, a quiet attunement to forces beyond the natural world. He notices what others overlook. He asks questions that seem strange, even uncomfortable. He connects patterns that science alone cannot. Where Dr. Seward seeks answers in microscopes and medical texts, Van Helsing searches in folklore, anthropology, theology, and old European superstitions, fields Victorian intellectuals dismissed as primitive, unscientific, or embarrassing. But Van Helsing understands a profound truth: the boundaries between science and myth are not as solid as people believe. Lucy's symptoms are not merely clinical, they are symbolic. Her deterioration cannot be captured by instruments or explained by pathology. Something ancient is at work, something that demands a broader lens. Van Helsing does not immediately reveal his suspicions. He knows that to speak too soon would result in ridicule. So instead, he does what great teachers do: he guides Seward, step by step, toward the truth. He insists on precautions that seem absurd: garlands of garlic around Lucy's room, closed windows, even in the stifling heat, strict supervision through the night, objects rooted in superstition, not science. Seward is perplexed, even skeptical, but he trusts his mentor, even when he doesn't understand. Yet science cannot protect Lucy. Not here, not against this enemy. Her decline accelerates. Dracula tightens his grip. Each failed attempt to save her becomes another blow to Seward's belief in rationality. It is here, in the tension between these two men, that Bram Stoker explores a powerful idea: true knowledge requires humility. Science without openness becomes blindness. Faith without reason becomes chaos. Only together can they illuminate the truth. Van Helsing is the embodiment of that synthesis. He is a scientist of immense skill, but he does not worship science. He understands that the world is wider, older, and stranger than Victorian certainty allows. He believes in evidence, but not only the evidence that can be weighed or measured. He believes in stories, traditions, symbols, and the accumulated wisdom of cultures long past. He believes that the supernatural is not to be dismissed simply because it cannot be explained. Van Helsing's presence brings hope, but also gravity. He realizes the threat they face is far greater than a mere illness. He knows the enemy even before he dares to speak his name. Yet he also knows something else: he cannot face this danger alone. And he cannot defeat it with knowledge alone. He must teach others. He must awaken their minds. He must prepare them for a world that defies their understanding. And that, perhaps, is Van Helsing's greatest gift. He empowers those around him, Seward, Arthur, Mina, Quincy, to rise above the limits of their age, to embrace truths that lie beyond the boundaries of Victorian science. Through him, the novel shifts from confusion to awakening, from individual tragedy to collective purpose, from denial to confrontation. Van Helsing becomes the guide who leads the others out of intellectual darkness and toward the battle ahead. As the chapter closes, two worlds are preparing to collide: the world of reason, the world of the supernatural. And standing at the intersection, wise, unyielding, compassionate, is Professor Van Helsing, bridging the divide. The war against Dracula is about to begin. Chapter 7. Mina Harker, the light against the dark. If Lucy Westenra represents innocence corrupted, then Mina Harker represents something very different: resilience, intellect, and the quiet strength that stands in direct opposition to Dracula's spreading darkness. In this chapter, we shift our focus to Mina, a woman who embodies the best qualities of the Victorian era while simultaneously transcending its limitations. Unlike Lucy, who is cherished largely for her beauty and sweetness, Mina is respected for her mind, her discipline, her clarity, her devotion, and her emotional intelligence. She becomes the anchor around which the others gather, the light that refuses to dim, the voice of humanity in a narrative sinking deeper into the supernatural. Mina is not simply Jonathan Harker's fiancée, she is his equal in courage, steadiness, and resolve. From the very beginning, she demonstrates a rare ability to balance compassion with practicality. She keeps her own journal, organizes records, types out Jonathan's entries, and applies a methodical intelligence that later becomes essential in the hunt for Dracula. Where Jonathan is trembling and traumatized, Mina is patient and focused. Where Seward is trapped in the rigidity of science, Mina is flexible, perceptive, and emotionally attuned. Where Van Helsing is burdened by ancient knowledge, Mina offers clarity and hope. She is the bridge between worlds not through mystical power, but through empathy. And that is what makes her extraordinary. When Jonathan escapes Dracula's castle and is found in a state of near collapse, it is Mina who heals him not with medicine or rituals, but with presence. She listens. She comforts. She accepts the impossible truths he brings back from Transylvania without disbelief or denial. Where others would recoil, Mina leans in. Where others would question sanity, she seeks understanding. This openness is not naivete, it is strength. Meanwhile, Lucy's death casts a long shadow over these early chapters. Mina grieves her friend deeply, but she does not allow grief to paralyze her. Instead, she channels it into determination, into clarity, into a growing conviction that something monstrous has entered their world. And it is here that fate reveals its cruel symmetry. As Mina steps forward into the role of protector, organizer, and emotional center of the group, she also becomes Dracula's next target. But Stoker does not rush this transformation. He allows us to first see Mina as a force of stability, a guiding light. Her intelligence shines brightest when she gathers the journals, letters, and recordings from all involved. She begins organizing them, transcribing them, cross-referencing them. It is through her efforts that the scattered knowledge of the group becomes a coherent narrative. She is the architect of understanding, the one who gives shape to chaos, the one who sees the patterns others miss, and it is precisely this clarity, this strength that draws Dracula's attention. Lucy was chosen for her innocence. Mina is chosen for her influence. By corrupting Lucy, Dracula struck at purity. By targeting Mina, he strikes at hope. Before the darkness touches her, though, we witness the depth of her humanity, her devotion to Jonathan, her respect for Van Helsing, her gentle rapport with Seward and Arthur, her empathy even for Renfield, the madman others fear. Mina listens to him, she speaks to him gently, and in Renfield's fractured mind, she becomes a figure of purity, a presence so kind, so luminous, that even his madness recognizes her value. Later, Renfield will fight and die in an attempt to protect her, because even madness understands what the darkness threatens to destroy. As this chapter draws to a close, Mina stands at the center of a fragile circle, a circle that includes love, grief, intellect, and the weight of all that has been lost. She is the quiet warrior of the story, the moral compass, the emotional foundation. But the shadow is coming. In the chapters ahead, Mina will face trials far more harrowing than Jonathan's imprisonment or Lucy's corruption. Dracula will reach for her not merely to consume, but to break the unity and hope she symbolizes. And the light she embodies will flicker, but it will not go out. For now, we hold her in this moment steady, luminous, unbroken before the darkness makes its move. Chapter 8, Renfield, the Prophecy Ignored. In earlier chapters, we touched upon the peculiar figure of Renfield, the patient in Dr. Seward's asylum, whose madness seemed to vibrate in tune with Dracula's presence. But now, Renfield steps into the spotlight. And what we witness is not just insanity but revelation. Renfield is one of the most fascinating and misunderstood characters in Dracula. To the Victorian mind, he is a lunatic, unpredictable, dangerous, incoherent. But beneath his erratic actions lies something more, a dark intuition, a psychic sensitivity, an awareness of the supernatural long before the rational mind is ready to see it. In this chapter, Renfield becomes a prophet ignored. While doctors analyze him, while Seward dismisses his ravings as pathology, while society locks him away behind iron bars, Renfield is the only person who knows. Knows that a predator walks among them. Knows that a greater master has arrived. Knows that the world is about to change forever. The first sign is subtle. Renfield grows restless, his energy rising like a tide pulled by an invisible moon. He paces his cell, muttering to himself, trembling with anticipation. His mania no longer feels random, it feels responsive. Dracula is near. Then begins the ritualistic obsession, consuming insects, then spiders, then birds, an ascending chain of life force. To Dr. Seward, this behavior is madness. To Renfield, it is preparation. Others eat food. He consumes vitality. He wants strength for the master, he senses strength to serve, strength to obey, strength to transcend. Renfield is not trying to escape reality, he is trying to align himself with it. Each day, Dracula's influence grows stronger, and Renfield's behavior reflects it like a distorted mirror. He becomes euphoric one moment, despairing the next, as if he is caught between devotion and terror. The turning point arrives when Renfield begins begging to be released, not to flee, but to protect himself, or perhaps to protect someone else. He tells Seward life is precious, all life, and I do not wish to lose mine. These words, though fragmented, hint at clarity, a clarity Seward is too blinded by science to hear. Renfield knows Dracula is coming. He knows the asylum walls will not hold him. He knows something terrible will happen. Yet Seward dismisses these pleas as delusion. The tragedy deepens. As Dracula grows bolder in his movements across England, Renfield's agitation becomes unbearable. He screams at night, claws at the walls, tries desperately to break free, smashing furniture and injuring himself in the process. Every outburst is a message. Every frantic gesture is a warning. But no one listens. Renfield's connection to Dracula is not just psychological, it is metaphysical. He feels the Count's hunger the way an animal senses an earthquake. He knows when Lucy dies. He knows when Mina becomes the next target. He knows when Dracula enters the asylum at night, when darkness moves through hallways unseen by rational eyes. And then comes the moment that seals Renfield's fate. Mina Harker enters the asylum. Her presence, gentle, intelligent, deeply compassionate, touches something human within him. He sees in her not just a woman, but a symbol of purity, a soul worth saving. When he later senses Dracula's growing interest in her, Renfield becomes frantic, desperate to protect the one person who ever showed him kindness. His madness becomes heroism. He begs Seward again, do not let her be harmed. For God's sake, protect her. But the warnings fall on deaf ears. Dr. Seward, still bound by his scientific worldview, hears only the ramblings of a lunatic. He still cannot imagine a threat outside the boundaries of logic, and that blindness becomes catastrophic. When Dracula finally comes for Mina, bold, predatory, unstoppable, Renfield is the only one who stands in his way. He fights, he resists, he sacrifices himself in a desperate attempt to stop the monster he once worshipped. But strength born of madness is no match for ancient evil. Dracula leaves Renfield broken, his body shattered, his blood spilled across the floor, his final breaths spent not in madness, but in clarity. In his dying words, Renfield finally reveals the truth he's tried to express all along. Warnings, descriptions, moments where the supernatural crossed into his cell. Only then, too late, do they understand. Renfield was never a mad prophet. He was an ignored witness. A man cursed with knowledge he could not articulate. A soul caught between the human world and the darkness beyond it. His death is one of the novel's most poignant tragedies. Because in the end, Renfield was right. Right about Dracula. Right about Mina. Right about the danger. Right about the coming storm, and no one listened. Renfield's arc stands as a powerful reminder. Sometimes madness knows more truth than sanity can bear. Chapter 9. Mina Harker, the tragic transformation. We have followed Mina Harker as she stood at the center of the story, the quiet anchor holding together a world unraveling under the shadow of Dracula. But now, the darkness turns toward her, and what unfolds is not merely horror but tragedy. Lucy was innocence corrupted. Mina is strength violated. Mina's narrative arc is one of the most emotionally devastating in Dracula, not because she becomes a victim, but because she becomes a battleground. Between light and corruption, between hope and despair, between humanity and the ancient hunger of the undead. It begins subtly. Mina feels tired, yet pushes forward. She experiences strange dreams, yet convinces herself they are nothing. She grows paler, yet continues organizing journals and coordinating the group's efforts. She does not collapse like Lucy. Mina fights the darkness even as it wraps around her. But the tragedy is inevitable. One fateful night, while the men are away, Dracula infiltrates the asylum. He bypasses walls, locks, guards all the machinery of Victorian order and security. Because darkness does not respect human boundaries. Renfield senses it first. He screams. He begs. He throws himself against the bars of his cell to warn them. But his warnings go unheeded until it is too late. When Seward, Van Helsing, and the others return, they hear Mina's cries. They burst into the room, and what they see is one of the most haunting scenes in Gothic literature.
Towering.
Predatory, wrapped in shadows, and Mina trapped in his grasp, forced to drink blood from a wound on his chest. It is a reversal of nature, a corruption of intimacy, a violation so profound that Stoker leaves much of it to implication because the horror lies not in description but in meaning. Blood in Victorian symbolism equals life, purity, sexuality, identity, soul. Dracula shatters all of these at once. By forcing Mina to drink his blood, he does not merely contaminate her body, he binds her spirit to his own. It is a ritual of domination, possession, and transformation. Mina collapses afterward, trembling, horrified by what she remembers and by what she cannot remember. She becomes marked, not with wounds, but with connection. Dracula can now reach her mind, move in her dreams, speak through her thoughts, sense her location, control her emotions. Mina becomes both victim and weapon. To the group, this moment is devastating. She has been their intellectual center, their hope, their unifying force. And now she carries within her the very darkness they seek to destroy. Van Helsing understands before anyone else. He sees the mark on her forehead, a mark burned into her skin when Dracula touched her with his unholy power. The symbol is invisible to the world, but not to those who know. And Mina knows. She understands the weight of what has happened. Her tears are not for her life, but for the danger she now poses to the people she loves. In a moment of piercing clarity, she says, "Do not hide the truth from me. Let me share the burden. Let me help you, even as I suffer." This is where Mina differs from Lucy, and why she becomes the emotional heart of the story. Lucy succumbed in silence. Mina fights in awareness. She refuses to let the darkness swallow her. She asks them to guard her, restrain her, protect themselves from her. She insists on participating in their strategies, even as the curse tries to pull her into the night. Her transformation is not merely a fall, it is a struggle. But the cost is heavy. She begins having visions. She feels Dracula's presence like a whisper behind her thoughts. She sees flashes of his journey, senses the boundaries of his hiding places, glimpses his unholy movements. These visions both help the group and terrorize her. She fears sleep. She fears herself. She fears becoming a monster like Lucy. The men, meanwhile, are racked with guilt, Jonathan most of all. He sees the woman he loves changing before his eyes, and he trembles at the thought of losing her. Not to death but to the undead, and yet, Mina consoles him. Even in her suffering, she radiates courage. Her transformation becomes symbolic. Lucy represented the Victorian ideal of feminine purity. Mina represents the Victorian ideal of feminine strength, intellect, resilience, moral clarity. Dracula's corruption of her is more threatening because she is more powerful, more aware, more essential. To conquer Mina is to conquer hope, but Mina does not break. She bends, she falters, she suffers, but she does not surrender. She becomes the battleground, and the battleground is not lost. Her love for Jonathan, her loyalty to their friends, and her unshakable humanity create a resistance within her, a resistance so powerful that even Dracula's curse cannot fully dominate her. Mina Harker stands at the edge of darkness, but she lights a torch, and that light becomes the guiding force for the hunt that follows. And now, he is determined to end it all where it began. The group races across harsh terrain, through storms and freezing winds, always one step behind the transport. But the closer they get, the stronger Mina's connection becomes, each vision, a pulse leading them toward the final confrontation. She is weakening, yet she endures. Her courage, more than any weapon, is the force pushing them forward. As the chapter closes, the group finally spots the caravan carrying Dracula's coffin up the mountain road toward the castle. The sun is sinking the last barrier between them and the full strength of the vampire. A battle is coming. A reckoning centuries in the making. A final clash between the living and the dead. And Mina's fate hangs in the balance. The hunt is reaching its end, but the darkness is not finished. The next chapter brings the confrontation that will decide everything. Chapter 11. The final confrontation, light against the dark. The journey across Europe has brought our group to the edge of the world, the ancient wilds of Transylvania, where the modern age dissolves, where superstition becomes law, and where the shadows belong not to imagination but to the undead. Now, in this chapter, the long pursuit reaches its crescendo. The coffin containing Dracula, carried by loyal gypsies, wins its way toward the castle, his fortress, his sanctuary, his birthplace of terror. If the Count reaches those walls before sunset, the battle will be nearly unwinnable. Within the castle's old magic, he will regain strength faster than they can wound him. And Mina's soul will be forever bound to his. This is not just a chase. It is a race against time. A race against night. The group converges on the path from different directions, each man arriving through hardship, exhaustion, and unbroken determination. Jonathan Harker and Quincy Morris on horseback, cutting across steep hillsides. Arthur Homewood and Dr. Seward following the river path, pushing their bodies past the limits of endurance. Van Helsing guiding Mina, using sacred rituals to protect her weakened spirit as they close in on the castle grounds. It is a moment of convergence, the living gathering against the undead. As the sun begins its descent, the gypsy escort accelerates, sensing danger but unaware of its true source. The coffin, heavy with earth and ancient evil, is strapped tightly to the wagon, its lid sealed, its occupant dormant, but not unaware. Dracula senses them. He feels their presence, their unity, their defiance, their will to end him. And through Mina, he lashes out with his mind, rage, fury, hunger, and the primal instinct of a predator cornered. Mina trembles, gasping, fighting the intrusion. She feels the Count trying to pull her into darkness, trying to cloud her vision, trying to sever the bond that has guided the group so far. But she resists. Her strength, though fragile, glows with a fierce, quiet force. And so the final confrontation begins. Jonathan and Quincy reach the wagon's first, blades drawn, hearts pounding. They charge in with the desperation of men who know this is not a battle of courage, but of survival. The gypsies fight back with ferocity, loyal not to Dracula himself, but to the gold he pays and the fear he commands. The clash is brutal, chaotic, steel against steel, shouts echoing across the frozen landscape. Dr. Seward and Arthur arrive moments later, joining the fray, turning the tide from chaos into coordinated assault. These are not soldiers, but grief and love have made them warriors. Every blow they strike is fueled by Lucy's memory. Every breath by Mina's suffering. Every heartbeat by Jonathan's first terror in that castle. The wagon lurches, the horses rear, the coffin shakes. Inside, Dracula begins to stir. The sun is dropping faster now, its last rays bleeding across the snow, turning the battlefield red. Time collapses into seconds. Jonathan reaches the coffin first. With a cry raw from years of fear and rage, he tears at the lid, his hands shaking but unyielding. Quincy covers him, blood running down his side from a blade wound, but refusing to fall. Arthur and Seward hold back the last wave of attackers. Van Helsing, atop the hillside with Mina, raises a cross and speaks ancient words that burn through the air, a final protection against the Count's psychic lashings. At last the lid cracks open. Inside lies Dracula, not majestic, not powerful, but corpse-like, pale, with lips stained by centuries of blood. He is weakened, yet even in stillness, terrifying. A monarch of the dead at his most vulnerable. Jonathan does not hesitate. He brings down his knife, a swift, mortal blow slicing through the Count's throat with a force born of trauma and love intertwined. In the same instant, Quincy drives his Bowie knife into Dracula's heart. The sound is not human. A terrible, guttural cry escapes the body, a scream that rattles the earth, shakes the mountains, tears through the wind. Dracula's eyes blaze open, filled with centuries of rage, hunger, and ancient sovereignty. Then, in a heartbeat they soften, not in triumph, but in release. The Count's flesh begins to crumble, turning to dust, swirling upward in the cold wind, dissolving into the very land that birthed him. The earth reclaims its monster. The battle is over. But the victory is not without cost. Quincy Morris, brave and loyal to the last breath, collapses beside the coffin, the wound in his chest too deep, too fatal to survive. The men gather around him, their joy shattered by grief. Mina kneels beside him, her tears falling like blessings on the snow. In his final moments, Quincy smiles, a quiet, peaceful smile, knowing that Mina is saved, that the evil is ended, that he has given his life for something larger than himself. As the last light of the sun slips away, Quincy dies a hero. The shadow that haunted England, that stalked Lucy, that corrupted Mina, that imprisoned Jonathan, that mocked science and defied reason, has finally been destroyed. The night breathes quietly. For the first time in many months, the darkness holds no terror. But the story is not yet over. There remains one final chapter: the return to life, to healing, to humanity. Chapter 12, the ending, the return of light. We have traveled through darkness, across oceans, through castles, across continents, through fear, grief, madness, and the fragile boundary between life and death. Now, in this final chapter, we witness what happens after the monster falls, after the scream fades, after the dust settles, after the living outlast the dead. This is not a chapter of horror. It is a chapter of healing. But healing is never simple. The moment Dracula dissolves into ash, something profound occurs. Mina feels the curse lift. It is not dramatic, not a jolt, not a scream, not a flash of light, but a quiet release. A soft exhale. A weight she has carried for weeks, pressed against her soul, simply evaporates. For the first time since the night Dracula forced his blood upon her, she feels clean. She touches the scar on her forehead, the mark of the unholy bond, and watches as it fades like mist under morning light. She is herself again. Whole. Freed. Human. The relief that washes across her is indescribable, like stepping out of a dream where she was both prisoner and battlefield. Jonathan, beside her, trembles with emotion. He has seen her on the brink of transformation, trapped between two worlds. Now she stands fully in the world of the living, her courage and purity unbroken. But joy is tempered by grief. Quincy Morris, brave, loyal, selfless, lies dying in the snow. His sacrifice, made without hesitation, becomes the final key that unlocks their victory. The group gathers around him. Arthur kneels with reverence, the memory of Lucy still heavy in his heart. Seward, shaken yet resolute, tries desperately to tend to Quincy's wounds, though he knows it is futile. Van Helsing stands silently, hands folded, like a priest honoring a fallen saint, and Mina, freed, but fragile, rests a hand on Quincy's chest, whispering gratitude through her tears. Quincy smiles. A soft, warm smile that seems to hold sunlight within it. His final words are simple words of faith, friendship, and peace. Then, as the last breath leaves him, the mountains fall silent. He dies with honor, with purpose, with love around him. The journey home is quiet. There is no triumphal celebration, no parade, no proclamation of victory. How could there be? The wounds they carry, physical, emotional, spiritual, run too deep. Yet something gentle begins to return to them. A sense of normalcy, the rhythm of ordinary life, the knowledge that they faced an ancient darkness and did not break. Jonathan and Mina return to England, not as victims, but as survivors bound by unshakable devotion. Their love, tested in fire, emerges stronger, steadier, deeper. Arthur Homewood withdraws from the public eye for a time, but eventually re-emerges not as a man crushed by grief, but as one strengthened by purpose. He carries Lucy's memory with grace, not despair. Dr. Seward, forever changed by the encounter, continues his work, but now with humility. No longer does he see science as a wall against mystery. He has learned that the world is wider than the limits of the mind. And Van Helsing, wise, weary, compassionate, returns to his homeland, his role completed. He leaves behind no fame, no recognition, no monuments. His victory is quiet, known only to a few. But history is shaped as much by quiet heroes as by loud ones. 7 years pass. Jonathan and Mina have a son, a boy with bright eyes and a fearless spirit. They name him Quincy, in honor of the friend who gave his life so they could live theirs. He grows up safe, healthy, surrounded by love. He knows nothing of castles or monsters or the night that almost stole his mother's soul. He knows only that he was named for a hero. And in that small, radiant truth light returns. Not through grand declarations. Not through monuments or legends, but through life continuing quietly, beautifully, stubbornly. This is the final message of Dracula. Darkness can consume, it can corrupt, it can destroy, but it cannot endure. Light persists, hope persists, love persists, always. The story ends not with fear, but with gentleness, not with terror, but with peace, not with death, but with rebirth. And so, as our journey through this timeless tale concludes, we are reminded evil is ancient. But courage is eternal, and as long as there are hearts brave enough to face the night, The dawn will always come. Epilogue. Thank you for staying with me through this long, shadowed journey. We have walked beside Jonathan as he trembled in a foreign land. We have mourned Lucy, fought with Seward, learned from Van Helsing. We have felt Mina's courage, Renfield's desperation, and Quincy's sacrifice. And together, we have watched the fall of one of literature's most enduring monsters. But more than a tale of vampires, Dracula is a story about us, our fears, our fragility, and our unbreakable strength. It reminds us that darkness is not always a creature with fangs. Sometimes it is the unknown. Sometimes it is grief. Sometimes it is the quiet dread of being powerless in a world too vast to understand. Yet it also reminds us of something else, that even in the deepest night, there is always a light willing to rise, a hand reaching out, a voice refusing to surrender. Jonathan found that light in Mina. Arthur found it through love. Seward found it through humility. Van Helsing through wisdom, and Quincy through sacrifice. And perhaps, in listening, you found a little of that light in yourself. Because stories like this endure not merely to frighten us, but to show us that courage does not grow in comfort, it grows in darkness. As we close this audiobook, I invite you to carry one thought with you: the world will always have shadows. But so long as there are hearts willing to face them, the dawn will always return. Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. And thank you for walking through the night with me. Until the next story, may your days be bright. And may your nights be peaceful.